morning. Merry Christmas. Winter solstice. Saturn-Jupiter conjunction. And we're all still standing. Anyway, thank you for coming this morning, both virtually and locally. This morning I'm talking about Christ and faith. Throughout the teachings, we are told that it is from the center of love that all saviors throughout the ages went forth into all countries, taking with them the message of compassion, the message of beauty and service, the message of sacrifice, simplicity, and fearlessness. We know that Christ is on the way back to humanity, to renew our hearts with a greater hope, a greater faith, and a greater love. As I was putting this together, our talk together for this morning, I couldn't help but think how particularly the last 2 weeks, I've been consciously observing how many people on the internet, on the media, our news anchor people, our journalists, and our friends are talking about hope. This comes from on high. This is that inspiration that is coming to us, that fights against darkness. It's telling us we're not going to accept that darkness is controlling our life. And thus, we have hope. And hope is one of those virtues, one of those magnets in life that is so permeating our heart nature that no matter what, if we are people of light, we will be people of hope. And so, let me repeat this statement. We know that Christ is on the way back to humanity to renew our hearts with what? With greater hope, greater faith, and greater love. In the book, The Externalization of the Hierarchy, it says, the point of decision in all hierarchical circles was reached during the period between the full moon of June 1936 and the full moon of June in 1945. The point of decision resulted in a decision arrived at by Christ to reappear or return to visible presence on earth as soon as is possible, considerably earlier than had previously been planned. In the reappearance of the Christ, that book, it says, this decision was necessarily made in consultation with the Lord of the world, the Ancient of Days. So today's talk is on the subject of faith. To have faith means to have beliefs. Belief in something greater than today, greater than yesterday, and greater than tomorrow. This is faith. So when you hear people, particularly our politicians of power, let's call them that, politicians who think they have power. Let's say that, politicians who think they have power. We know they have power if they have faith. If they believe in something greater than today, then I will listen to them, because they are politicians of light, politicians of faith, or any leader in any field. In today's society, no matter what country we live in, we will know that these are leaders of light, leaders of faith, leaders of hope, leaders of love, when they believe in something greater than today, greater than yesterday. We don't say, let's make America greater. See, that's a common language. There's no faith in such a statement. To have faith means to have an unshakable belief in something. A belief that no earthquake, no flood, no crises, no loss can remove from you. Faith is found in the beauty of your heart. I can't pronounce his name, so let me work on it here. Rabindranath, there we go, Tagore said, faith is the bird that feels the light and sings when the dawn is still dark. We often hear the phrase blind faith. Faith, according to popular thinking, implies a perpetual state of blindness, of not knowing or comprehending, groping in the dark, floating in a groundless, unreal way of belief. It is therefore extremely important for us to differentiate between the false concept of faith and the real concept of faith. In Proverbs 28, it says, as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. Our heart is the sanctuary where the Lord of the world dwells in all his glory. If you feel that the Most High exists within your heart, then you understand the beauty of faith. If you feel that the Most High exists within your heart, you will start living a life of faith. And you will start living a life of beauty, of light, of love, and power. For such a life is not made of masks, of fears, or artificiality and pseudo images. The one of faith is a messenger of the great ones. Every year at Christmas, we celebrate the birth of Christ, the great flame. This is our legacy, a reminder that each of us is, in essence, a living flame, a spark of God. In that knowledge, we celebrate the next coming, to renew in our hearts a greater hope, a greater faith, and a greater love. And it is in this knowledge that we place our trust. Faith is blind until we give birth to the Christ within. It's very interesting to take this understanding and put it into practice, because it creates tolerance and understanding, and it also evokes a light for us to follow those who have faith, to follow those who have light. And when I say follow, I'm not talking about subservience. I'm talking about support and belief, and joy. Because when we follow people of faith, we are following people who practice harmlessness. People of faith are those who have given birth to the Christ within. So when an individual tries to exercise the power of authoritarianism, in other words, to follow their authority as a human being, we know that they have not yet given birth to the Christ within. Those who have given birth to the Christ within have humility and know there is something greater to life than themselves. Do you understand what I'm saying? Okay. So faith is blind until we give birth to the Christ within. Once we give birth to the Christ within our heart, the Master within our heart, this eternal flame will forever keep you united with the principle of life. And in that principle, you will find faith. Each morning, upon awakening, you should say salutations to the Christ within my heart. Salutations to the Christ within my heart. Then you will not follow darkness. You cannot follow darkness when you salute the Christ within your heart. Do you have faith? Do you have a deep faith in the divine? Even when things are not going your way. If you do, you have faith in invisible powers. For to you, these powers are not invisible, but rather visible. And those visibilities will be literally given to you and shown to you. And this is why they are not invisible to people of faith. The faithless are blind. What is that famous story where a person, they're in a flood and, this person and that person and this person and the other person came to them to get them off the roof of that house so they don't drown in the flood? Well, they said, no, I'm waiting for Christ. I'm waiting for Christ to come save me. Well, he died. He went to heaven and Peter said, look, I sent you. See, blind. They had no faith. They were blind. All the signs are given to us, but if we have not given birth to Christ within the heart, we're not going to see the signs, and therefore they're invisible. But for those who have the faith, the signs are visible. You see life through your heart. As a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. Pope John Paul II said, faith leads us beyond ourselves. It leads us directly to God. If you have a closed heart, then you're not going to have faith. If your mind rules your heart, you will not have faith. Martin Luther King said, faith is the opening of all sides and at every level of one's life to the divine inflow. The person who is all mind will rely only on historical fact. The one who has faith is, through his heart, open to the divine inflow of the power of Christ. Do you have faith? Do you really, really have faith? If you do, you know that faith moves mountains. Christ was known for his healing powers. One day he heard someone say, "Thank you for healing me." Christ looked at that person and said, "But your faith healed you." Do you need healing? Physical healing, emotional healing, mental healing, spiritual healing. To be healed, you must have faith. In the book 100 Names of God by Torgrim Saradarian, it says, faithfulness means that you live in him, you think in him, you feel in him, you act in him. He is your innermost self. In that book, it says, what prevents you from having faith? And here's a list. A lack of contact. This is what prevents you from having faith. A lack of contact with the beauty, light, and love of Christ. A lack of belief in the return of the Christ. A lack of belief in the spiritual hierarchy, the kingdom of God. The spiritual hierarchy is the kingdom of God. A lack of beauty and love and joy and creativity in your life. This is what prevents you from having faith. A lack of blessing in your life. And a lack of respect for all life in all kingdoms. People who are lacking in faith have placed their beliefs in the material rather than the spiritual side of life, in money, in objects, in the intellect, in degrees and diplomas, in professional positions, and this and that. All things which are of a transient nature. So interesting. As I'm reading this, I was thinking, this image came to my mind. This is so cool. It was so uplifting and so simple. A dear friend sent me a video through Messenger. Lives in Pennsylvania, and they had tons of snow dumped on them, feet of snow. And here she is outside in this sub-degree weather, and her son's taking a video of what she's doing. He's up above from the apartment. And so he he sped up the activities so that what she was doing was going very fast, even though it was slow. She was walking through the snow to form a heart. And it was the coolest thing to see. I mean, here she is running along. No way could she have done that into the deep snow. But she perfectly formed this heart. She was enjoying the snow so much in that cold weather that she drew this heart with her footsteps. And I thought, this is joy. This is simplicity. This is love. It's beauty, love, joy, creativity, blessing. This is faith. Faith supersedes the material, though it also can permeate the material. People lose all their money, and when they do, they become faithless in life. They lose their minds, and they become faithless. They lose their degreed paying jobs and lose their faith in life. Their husband or wife leaves them and they lose their faith in life. What is most interesting to me, though, is that as a person is experiencing loss, if there is any kind of element of faith in their heart, it will draw someone into their life, which increases that kernel of faith. If this does not happen, then that person becomes cold-hearted or agnostic or even an atheist. Here's a story. Last Friday, as I was writing today's Christmas talk about faith, a young man called me, and let's call him Fred. Fred called to tell me that his sister's husband, who lives in Michigan, was in the last few hours of life. A 35-year-old man with cancer. Fred's sister was angry. She was afraid and seemingly faithless. As Fred and I talked, he was most fearful that his sister, because of all the drugs in the house, would take her life, for she had a history of suicide. As we continued to talk, Fred told me a story about his neighbor, whose 15-year-old daughter had survived bone cancer. When the neighbor's daughter survived, he vowed he would help anyone he could who was in a similar crisis. Fred's neighbor had moved to Michigan and lived only 1 block away from his sister. Thursday, Fred's neighbor went to his sister's home and asked if he could spend some time with her and her ill husband. At first, the sister refused, but the neighbor was not going to give up. Finally, the sister invited him in. He began praying for her husband and trying to ignite the kernel of faith in the sister's heart. When I heard this story, I was so excited and told Fred that his sister was going to be fine. For through this most faithful man, that woman's faith became ignited. The seed of faith in her heart became ignited. So no matter what happens to her husband, her faith is going to keep her in the aura of love and beauty. When you compose a poem of beauty, that beauty remains with you and gives you faith in the spiritual power of beauty. When you compose music heard in the higher worlds, the music of the higher worlds will remain with you, giving you faith in the higher worlds. When you commune with God in all His glory, you have faith in the continuity and immortality of life. Faith is a word, but the power of faith is beyond words. It is experience. Faith is experience. It is knowingness. It is beingness. It is like, I know this is a very simple story and perhaps not appreciated, but it's like last August, one of my pups became very, very ill, and we had to rush her down to a specialist in Phoenix who said, if you don't have the surgery, she's going to die. And the surgery could have been up to $11,500. So, I said, I can't afford that. And there was no promise that she would survive anyway because she had so much wrong with her. So we put her back in the car. Joe and I did. She hates the car, and drove all the way back from Phoenix to Prescott. And I made the decision I was going to take her off of all this medication they had put her on, except for one. And because the medication was making her sick anyway. Well, she is healthier than ever today. 4 months later, no surgery. We saved $11,500 and some dollars. You know, and she may leave tomorrow, but this is faith. You know, faith in the healing power of this puppy. And if it was time for her to leave, then let it happen. See, this is, to me, faith. As she's running down the hallway this morning, I'm thinking, yeah, okay, she's back to her ornery self. When spiritual teachings say that Christ is on the way back to the world to renew in our hearts a greater hope, a greater faith, and a greater love, those who gave birth to Christ within their hearts know he will return. This is faith. To have faith means you know he will never forsake you, no matter what happens. To have faith means you know he will never betray you. Remember, Pope John Paul said, faith leads us beyond ourselves. It leads us directly to God. Faith is essential for all religions. Some people say, if we believe in God, and it turns out he does exist, then we'll be safe. And if he doesn't, we won't have lost anything. Some speak of a leap of faith, like a child that jumps off of a table into the arms of his father. The child is not 100% sure his father will catch him, but he has enough faith to jump. In Agni Yoga, our faith is strong. Faith is formed by giving birth to the flame within your heart, the Christ within. It is not blind. It is not a leap. Faith for the Agni Yogi, for the student of ageless wisdom, for the spiritual student, faith is active. Faith is a knowingness that you live in him, that you think in him, you feel in him, you act in him. He is your innermost self. This is our refuge, our faith. And from this refuge springs beauty and goodness and joy and freedom. When you are confused and angry or lost, if you practice these principles, you will find your faith and live your faith. It will keep you going through the dark days and nights of your life. When you breathe in beauty and exhale beauty, faith is not blind. When you breathe in love and exhale love in all that you do, faith is not blind. When you give forgiveness and ask for forgiveness, faith is not blind. When you give gratitude and receive gratitude, faith is not blind. So yes, Christ was born over 2,000 years ago, but those who have faith continue to celebrate his birth. What he gave to the world continues to live in our hearts and minds today. It is our faith that causes us to yearly celebrate the birth of Christ. If you yearly celebrate the birth of Christ, you will also yearly celebrate your own birth. For we're all born of the Most High. Faith gives us confidence. Self-confident people have a deep faith in the divine, in the invisible powers, because their contact with their inner divinity is magnetic to divine help. And this is why we say, have faith. Merry Christmas.